I recently read the book The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown, and I think it gave words to a lot of things that people quietly struggle with but don't always know how to explain. Things like shame, belonging, self-compassion, and just the beauty of ordinary life. And just look at how many tabs I have in my physical copy. That should tell you that there are a lot of really good parts here. I had seen a few of her videos before, but this was my first time reading one of her books, and I really liked that it didn't feel like a self-help book. It felt more like someone reflecting with you rather than talking at you. She shares her own experiences and how her perspective changed over time, and that made the whole thing feel a lot more relatable and human. One of the quotes that stayed with me the most was, "Owning our story and loving ourselves through the process is the bravest thing that we will ever do." I really liked that because I think a lot of people can be good at being aware of themselves, pointing out their patterns, their flaws, and the things that they want to change, but that doesn't automatically mean that they know how to have self-compassion. I feel like real growth happens when self-compassion and honesty exist together. Not having excuses, not avoiding, but also not constant self-punishment. Just being honest, having grace for yourself, and choosing to keep going again and again. And I really loved the quote, "The key is to separate people from their behaviors. To address what they're doing, not who they are." That really helps separate your behavior from who you are, which makes it easier to stop being so hard on yourself and actually make changes. Another line that felt very true was, "Wholehearted living is not a one-time choice, it's a process." Because growth is not deciding one day that you're just going to be better and never struggle again. It's more like being aware when you're slipping into old patterns, noticing what gets in the way, and choosing differently. She also talks about how the definition of love is to show your affection through actions, not just words. If we mistreat people but still say "I love you," it can come across as a miscommunication. So the way that you show up is much more important than some may realize. In practicing common humanity has been such a big game changer for me because, as I've said in previous videos, seeing yourself as someone else helps you to not be so hard on yourself, because you would not be that hard on someone that you love. So why treat ourselves any differently? And we're so quick to think this is just a me problem, or like everyone else seems so comfortable, etc. But really, a lot of people struggle with the same things that we do. It's also important to trust your own intuition. Sometimes instead of listening to our own opinion or realize what we are really passionate about, we tend to go to others to ask them their opinions, only to often be met with the response, "I'm not sure, what does your gut say?" So finding that answer within yourself is almost always the best option, and we need to trust that. Moving to the next point, using one of the simplest lines in the book, shame is basically the fear of being unlovable. And I think that says so much because shame really does go deeper than a lot of people realize. It's not just feeling embarrassed, it's the fear that if people saw certain parts of you that they wouldn't love or accept you. And because of that, shame grows in silence. The more hidden something feels, the heavier it gets. And bringing things into the light can be uncomfortable, but it's the only way that shame loses its power. Another really powerful part was when she described the difference between fitting in and belonging. She talks about how fitting in is changing yourself to be accepted, whereas belonging is just being who you are. And I thought that was such a simple yet powerful distinction, because I think a lot of people know the feeling of when you go somewhere and you're around others, you almost have like this push and pull feeling of, do I adapt myself to fit in, or do I stay true to myself? And the thing is, fitting in may work on the outside, but on the inside it is so exhausting. And there's a tiredness that comes from constantly shaping yourself. And I think that's why authenticity can feel so uncomfortable sometimes. It sounds nice in theory, but in real life it can feel awkward and vulnerable. The part of the book that probably stayed with me the most was the one about joy, rest, and ordinary life. I really loved how she talks about how our culture is so quick to dismiss quiet, ordinary life as boring or unimportant, because I feel like social media especially has trained people to think that life only matters when it looks impressive or unusual. But the truth is, ordinary life is our life. Think about it. At the end of our lives, are we really going to think about all of the events and places that we went to, or are we going to think about the day-to-day? Waking up next to your partner, calling your family, or even just being outside in nature. We truly need to grasp onto these so-called small moments, because all of these small moments that we may take for granted is what truly makes up our lives. And the sections on rest and play really resonated with me as well, because she talks about how things like rest and play are just as important as productivity and health. And I completely agree. We are not meant to be constantly working, optimizing, and being productive. I loved the line, "The opposite of play is not work, it's depression." And she said, take something off of your to-do list and add take a nap. I just think that is such a strong reminder that rest is not pointless. Play is not pointless, and neither is joy. These things are all part of being a healthy person. And the same goes for creativity. I liked how she pushes back on the idea that some people are creative and others just aren't, because I used to think this too. I think a lot of people grow up thinking that creativity really only counts if it looks a certain way. I thought that I wasn't creative because I never would draw or paint or do things like that. But now I really see creativity differently. For me, it shows up in making these videos and going through that whole process. So I really liked the reminder that it shows up in different forms. Another part I really loved was the idea that what we love as kids stays with us forever. But when we become adults, sometimes we have like this embarrassment about it and shut down over it. For me, when I was a kid, I was made fun of for the way that I sang, so I just never did it again. But now I've leaned back into it, and I truly have so much fun, even though it's vulnerable. Overall, this book didn't make me feel like I was trying to become someone else. It felt more like an invitation to come back to myself, to my creativity, and to the people around me. I want to end with this quote because I think it wrapped everything up really nicely. She said in the book that choosing to love and live with our whole hearts is an act of defiance, because I do think it's a little defiant these days to live honestly and let yourself be seen, to stop chasing perfection and appreciate your life for what it really is. If you've also read this book or have a different book that made you reflect in a similar way, I would love to hear about it. And if you like these more thoughtful, reflective videos, you're always welcome to stay. Thank you for being here. I'll see you next time.